Doctors of Reddit, what's the biggest case of faking it you've ever seen? Taking trauma call during surgery residency, had a prisoner come in after a fight and claimed he couldn't move or feel his legs. All the CT scans and MRIs were normal, but we would shield his legs so he couldn't see them and poke them with needles and other sharp objects. With enough force to cause pain, he never flinched or moved his legs at all. He was diagnosed with SURA, spinal cord injury without radiographic abnormality. He stayed in the hospital for a week, no improvement. Always had one guard with him. One night they were down in the lobby watching some television, but the guard needed to use the restroom. The patient said, "Where could I possibly go? I'm paralyzed." Guard left him alone for 2 minutes. Patient last seen sprinting down the road, naked butt cheeks flapping in the breeze. Made it to a city 4 hours away by car before he was caught again. I have never seen anyone fake it so well. Truly playing the long con. He should have waited until he was released for not being a public threat. Dermatologist here. Patient was convinced she had a melanoma and needed a biopsy and would need to be on workers' comp. I told her it looked like ink from a marker. She demanded a biopsy. I wiped the area off with an alcohol swab and showed her the ink and that there was no spot on her skin anymore. She stormed out threatening to sue. I'm just glad I cured her melanoma. Had a patient come in for a fall who now couldn't move their legs at all. Did a bunch of tests, didn't find anything. The patient was not at all fazed by suddenly being paralyzed, which was the first red flag. Didn't really believe anything was wrong, but the patient was still not moving their legs. My options are to admit for a huge workup or get them to walk. So I update them saying everything is fine, tests are negative, you can go home. Patient gets up, gets dressed and walks out without a word. Not a doctor but worked in healthcare for nearly 20 years. While taking a break from the ICU, due to it being emotionally draining, I worked in home health for a bit. I had a patient who clearly had Munchausen syndrome. On a daily basis she would call her insurance to see what things would be covered if she was diagnosed with this or that. She called her doctor's office an average of 5x during my shift with her. She would report all kinds of non-real symptoms. She pestered the doctors into do exploitive laparoscopic surgery, of course nothing was found. One day I walked in and she was rubbing her incisions with rotten cabbage trying to get it infected. She wasn't seeking pain meds, except to sell, really she was just as happy with antibiotics or stool softeners, anything, as long as they wrote her a prescription and she got to go to the pharmacy where she did a whole song and dance for them too, claiming allergies and reactions. She always increased the exaggeration of her story too. One time she fluttered her eyes, after making sure I was looking, and said she lost consciousness in that half a second. She called the doctor and claimed she lost consciousness for 5 minutes, she called the insurance and claimed it was 10 minutes, she called the pharmacy and claimed it was 30 minutes, then she called 911 and told them she woke up on the floor after losing consciousness for 4 hours. The worst thing about her was she was a mom. Her son was 28 at the time, and by all the stories of his childhood illnesses and all her saying how he is severely disabled, I knew she basically fucked up his childhood with Munchausen by proxy. She portrayed him as being severely disabled and that's why he would never find a wife. I met him, he was healthy and of average intelligence. He wasn't looking for a wife, he was gay, but she refused to accept that. Working with her was so miserable that I took a couple years off from any and all healthcare after that. We had a patient faking a seizure, so my supervisor told one of us to get the brain needle. The patient made a miraculous and swift recovery without intervention. That's the best part about most of these stories, when they make up some form of fake machine so that the patient stops faking. Cracks me up every time. Fake problems require fake solutions. Young, 18 to 20, woman went running into small rural hospital ER pretending to have abdominal pain. Police officer had tagged her going 40+ km over the limit, which was stunt driving as per the new law in Ontario, impound and license suspension automatic. Cop followed her into ER and apparently said he'd be waiting for her when she left. Locum staff such as myself were housed at a small B&B about 15 minutes away, and the ER had pre-printed order sets to be done before we arrived. When I arrived, she flat out admitted that she just came in because she freaked out and didn't stop. I told her we'd give her 45 minutes to call her parents/family before I booted her. Except, BHCG came back positive, and subsequent ultrasound came back showing extremely early ectopic. Officer figures out something is up when he hears air ambulance call come in over radio. She was completely asymptomatic and just worked out that she dodged both charges and a life-threatening issue by accident. It was definitely a WTF moment. Edit, well, this blew up overnight. I got a few messages. A little more info. Small rural hospitals in northern Ontario often service areas from more than an hour's drive away and still only have a catchment area of 2,000 to 3,000 people. When on call, it was just that. We would do our days in the community clinic, then maybe hospital rounds, then go home and be on call. We wouldn't be at the hospital. There wasn't an on-call room where you would stay, for example. There were lots of times that you'd go a full night without being woken up, or maybe just a call from the acute care inpatient wing. Locums were short-term contracts for places that didn't have full-time medical staff for whatever reason. It's hard to attract clinicians if you don't even have broadband internet in the community. They generally pay very well. Reminds me of an old post where some hobo came to the hospital speaking incoherently, and they decided to give him a checkup anyway to show to the students. It was a university hospital, and he turned up to have some issue with the liver. After they treated him, he became lucid, and turns out he was a professor on his way to a lecture when his liver stopped functioning properly and he couldn't think clearly because of that, so he was just wandering the streets for a while.